Dixie is a thing. It's a place, but it's also a spirit, I think.
Once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know.
Welcome to Not Forgotten, a weekly podcast sharing the stories of a place known as Utah's Dixie, and brought to you by the Doc Booth Foundation. Through stories as universal as they are personal, this podcast is dedicated to the memory of legendary family physician Dr. Craig Booth and to defining, preserving, and perpetuating the spirit of Dixie embodied in his life and work.
Hi, I'm Lyman, host of the Not Forgotten podcast. For more than 40 years, I've been writing and publishing with the intent of connecting landscape and story in the American Southwest. I believe the words spoken by a character in a story by Barry Lopez. Everything is held together by stories, he said. That is all that is holding us together, stories and compassion. Dr. Craig Booth was a man of stories and compassion. His personal story is one of the many that have made Utah's Dixie what it is, and his compassion is at the heart of that elusive entity we call the Dixie spirit. On a bright September morning, the bus ground to a halt at the curb, and a load of kids from the southeast part of town filed out the door and onto the Woodward campus. Among them was an anxious seventh grader, fresh out of East Elementary, ready for initiation into the cold, cruel world of junior high school. Me. Before me and above me stood the solemn Woodward School, erected 1901. But no one went inside. Instead, they headed across the street. The cars stopped while all the students marched like robots toward a store with the name Judd's painted across its high facade. Like a lemming, I joined the line that streamed through the crosswalk leading to the long, narrow building. When I walked through the doorway, it was as though I had stepped back 50 years. The store's interior was hazy in the morning light. On the left, a long glass case extended back 20 feet or so. Behind the glass lay some of the all-time great candies: Whoppers, Lemon Heads, Grape Sticks, Milk Duds, Atomic Fireballs, Ding Dongs, and Black Crows. Mrs. Judd stood behind the glass case, pulling candy from multicolored boxes and plucking nickels, dimes, and pennies from a sea of youthful hands. Farther back in the haze stood Tom Judd, behind another counter, taking orders for root beer, 7-Up, and grape knee-high. He'd listen to 3 or 4 orders, then drop back to the old round Pepsi cooler, lift its thick rotund lid, draw forth several tall frosty bottles, and pop off their caps on the side of the cooler. On around to the right were the grocery and dry goods shelves filled with boxes of Tide, Quaker Oats, and stacks of Levi's. A long, flat wooden counter ran all the way down the right side of the store, and on it sat the guys, mostly ninth graders, mostly guys with the athletic status it took to own a coveted space on the counter. I looked down the line of fellows and wondered if I would ever find a spot on that counter. Near the end sat the only 7th grader in the bunch, a friend of mine. He was having breakfast, a cherry Alette, chased with icy Pepsi. Breakfast of champions. He motioned me toward him. "Have a seat," he said. I was reluctant. What business did I have sitting on that counter when so many 8th and 9th graders, some of them former Little League All-Stars and punt, pass, and kick champions, leaned against the candy case with no place to sit? "It's okay," my friend said, through a chocolate-stained smile. He pushed the guy next to him a foot to the left, scrunching the line of boys on the counter like an accordion. He always did have guts. I turned my rear to the counter and hopped backward onto the flat Formica slab, thereby gaining a degree of status and establishing my place in the world. For 3 years, there was always a place for me on the counter, a place to talk over current events, like the bus wreck the high school football team had had on their way to the state championship game, a place from which to size up girls, a place to discuss the weighty matters of education, such as who might have an old research paper that could be easily altered, a place to eat lunches of barbecued potato chips and RC Cola, and a place to negotiate loans to get you through to Friday. Judd's was also a place to dream. Every noon hour, the parade of high school studs would begin. They'd slink by in their 57 Chevs, 64 Malibus, and 59 Ford pickups, stop briefly at the crosswalk, then burn rubber all the way past the old Orson Pratt home. We were impressed. They were certainly cool. We planned on being just like them when we finally got out. And we finally did get out. But Judd's went on just the same, just like it had for 50 years and just like it has ever since. Tom Judd's grandfather, Thomas Judd, built the place in 1911 and ran it as a full-service mercantile, including hay, grain, and tack for horses, until he died in 1922. Joseph Judd, Tom's father, operated the store until 1954, when Tom took over. All three of Tom's boys, Randy, Brent, and Joe, put in time there as well. Many years ago, Mark and Barbara Green bought the store and the old Bentley Judd home that connected to it. They restored both buildings, and Tom stayed on to manage the store. And the kids kept on coming. Tom had seen them come and go in baggy pants, bell-bottoms, crew cuts, beetle cuts, mohawks, mini skirts, and every other imaginable fashion. 5 or 6 generations have sat on the counter at Judd's. Kids who later marched off to World War I, kids who later survived the Great Depression, and kids who went away to put down Hitler, Hirohito, and Ho Chi Minh. Judd's has been Judd's since the kindergarten, elementary, junior high, high school, and college all shared the same campus across the street. And it's still Judd's, even though those same buildings are now barely enough to house a very small fraction of the students of this community. Judd's may not be exactly the same as it used to be, but it's still there. Somehow, it feels awfully good just knowing that. As we think about the stories of Utah's Dixie, and as we look at that idea of the Dixie spirit, it's interesting because most of us who grew up here who spend our youth here have some really fond memories of a place called Judd's Store. And there's something very symbolic about that, I believe, because that store it comes right out of our pioneer heritage. It comes right out of that original Dixie spirit, and it still exists today. And we still connect with it today in really special ways. I'm grateful. I feel blessed today to have 4 just absolutely wonderful people here in the studio to talk about Judd's Store. Lisa Whitehead Shaw, dear friend. I think we both came out of the Dixie Memorial Hospital about the same day.
I think we did, and we're Hafens.
Lisa is here. She embodies the spirit of Dixie in such a wonderful way, as does Donna Leavitt Gentry, who grew up on these streets as well, and really just carries that spirit with her on a daily basis. And then my old friend, Kevin Willard. Kevin he wasn't born here, but his roots are as deep as they can get in Dixie. And we'll have you talk a little bit about that transition in your life, Kevin, as you left the what would we call it, the whatever Las Vegas was in those days, and came to St. George. But I'd love to begin today with Randy Judd, someone that I have admired, respected, and loved for as long as I can remember. And there's so much that I could say about Randy or President Judd or Professor Judd or however you might want to describe him. But he's part of this amazing Judd family that brought all this into being and brought it to a point where it still exists today. And Randy, I wondered if you could just go back in time and talk about how it is that we have a Judd store in St. George.
Thank you, Lyman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to talk about my heritage for a few minutes. My great-grandfather, Thomas Judd, came here to Dixie in 1864. His family was from England, and he was converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in about just before that. And his father, Samuel, had came over here before they did. But an interesting portion of him, I always wondered about great-grandpa and how he learned about business and how he learned the things that he did. And I come to find out in history that when he was a little boy, he came from quite a big family. But he had an aunt and an uncle who had no children, and that was the Harvey family. So they come to an agreement, the Harveys and the Judds, to adopt Thomas and to take him into their home, and he was to receive all of their inheritance and everything they had because they were quite wealthy and run several businesses over there. Great-grandpa learned business techniques from them when he was a child. He learned all about how to run a business and those types of things, and apparently learned them very well. But his family decided to come here to Dixie, and so he decided he wanted to come and be here and help bring them over, and then he was going to go back over to the Harveys to help them continue to run their businesses. But when he got over here and saw the conditions of Dixie and how poor the people were and the pioneer spirit that was here, he ended up staying and helping his family get established and get settled. He was 19 years old when he came, and so he brought with him some of the knowledge and the things. So he right away began interested in helping the Dixie spirit by being a business person and being involved. And he helped settle the area quite a bit and was involved over in Laverican with the canal over there, involved over in Nevada in some of those areas. He was pretty active in the church and a well-established pioneer. I like to tell the story that he was involved with the Woolly London Judd store, which was a mercantile store to begin with that he was involved with. He also was involved with the cotton factory, and he owned the cotton factory for a little while, and that was the first time it had actually made any money. But this Woolly London Judd store is very interesting because I always wondered how come great-grandfather never knew anything, never talked about the temple dedication, which was in 1877. He helped with the temple in regards to the people bringing the tithes and the offerings in and keeping track of the work that was going on and the things like that. But he never mentioned the dedication. And that's because he got with Woolly and Lund and decided to establish this store. So it ended up being built right across from the church's co-op mercantile, which many of the people said you shouldn't do that. You don't want to be in competition with the church's retail side, which back then we would have called it ZCMI. And so when they were getting it ready to go, all three of them were called on missions. which I look back now and think he could have very well been offended over that, and yet the spirit of Dixie and what was going on here was important to him. So they went and talked to Brigham Young, because he was living at that time here in Dixie. And they ended up calling two of them on missions, and he was one of them, and he went to England on his mission. And that's why he wasn't here for the temple dedication. But he was involved after that when he came back home with many things, too much to mention here. But the main thing was that his family was living in what was considered the Bentley home, which was that you would know right now, it's right behind the store. And so he decided to establish this mercantile store, and so it was built in 1911. And in 1912, he was the mayor of St. George, and he received a grant from the Carnegie Foundation to build a public library, which was built right across the street, which was part of the fun of Judd's store, was having the library right there. And of course, it's not there anymore, but he established that. So it became a mercantile store in 1911, which would be like a Walmart today. It would have had everything in it. So great-grandpa ran it and turned it over to his son Joseph, who ran it, and great-grandpa died in 1922, and Joseph took over the store and ran it at that time. Dad was up to BYU and in the military, and then in 1964, Grandpa passed away. Joseph passed away, which was an absolute shock to my father. And he had been working and helping his dad a little bit in the store, but at the age of 32, he ended up running this mercantile store, the Thomas Judd store. And in 54, I was 6 years old, and I can't hardly remember Grandpa at all. But what's interesting about the story is, and you mentioned it in your beginning here, Lyman, is that on the left was all of the candy and all of that kind of thing. On the right was the groceries and that, and I laugh today because you can get on the internet and you can order food from Walmart and have it delivered to you, which is a comeback to exactly the way it was, because I remember Dad picking up the phone, taking orders for food, those types of things, and then after he closed the store, he would deliver it out to the customers and do the very thing. And he had a big furniture item there that he could put the charge slips in and keep track of, a little cash register there. But the main thing was, of course, the school district and the kids coming over and buying and the Twinkie. The idea was a Pepsi and a bag of peanuts inside the bottle of Pepsi. It was a no to drink any type of Coke products at all, because Coca-Cola was in Cedar City and St. George's was Pepsi-Cola. So you were an apostate if you drank any type of cola drinks. And so Dad mainly sold Pepsi products, and you could, as Lyman has mentioned, you'd sit on the counter, and it was like a pecking order. The older you were, you'd be able to sit on the counters and that. When I was a boy growing up, I don't think I recognized what it meant to the rest of the school district and to the kids, because it was just my heritage. It was just Dad got up and went to work every morning at 7 o'clock. He would come home at 6 o'clock at night, and we would have supper together. It was just part of it. And everybody asked me, in fact, I had a little kid the other day at the store say, "Did you get all your candy free?" And I says, "No, I had to wash the windows and clean them. I had to sweep the floor. I had to do this and do that. I never got anything free." But so it was a common thing to me, and it was just my dad going to work. And you'd have all these kids coming for all this stuff, and it just was part of my heritage, part of my story. In the 1980s, Dad sold this family store to the Green family, who come in and made the Green Gate Village. My dad was raised on the house on the corner just west of the store, and that was his place that he was raised in. And so the Greens come in and reestablished everything, redid things, actually did some moves, a couple of pioneers' homes in on it, and it was a bed and breakfast to begin with. And because the Bentley house, where the Judds had been living in when great-grandpa decided to build the store, he built it attached to the house. So when most of us growing up, you actually had a third longer store there, and it went deeper back there. And so the Greens wanted the Bentley house, which the store was attached to, on the historical records, so they had to cut off a third of the store to get the house on the historical records. So that's become how the store became smaller. And so at the same time, the Green family went in and changed everything, did away with the glass counters and did away with the groceries and started making breadsticks and ice cream with shakes and those types of things. And so the store look changed in the 80s, but Dad continued to work for about 10 years for them and helped Mrs. Green, and then retired completely in the 90s and passed away in 2002. So that kind of gives an idea of the store, what it was like.
Randy, that's so awesome to hear you share. And I know we're going to want to come back to some more of those things as we go around the circle here, but you've set the stage for perhaps my generation to talk a little bit about our memories of that store and what it meant to us, because I think that it is just so wonderful that it's still there. And because it did mean so much to us, and we know that we can go back. Even though it's different, we know we can go back. We can walk through that door. I was talking to my 92-year-old father this week about Judd's store, and he grew up just down the road on Tabernacle Street. And my grandma was probably one of the beneficiaries of, would it have been Joseph's delivery system? Because she was trying to raise 14 kids on Tabernacle Street. And I can't help but think that she had groceries delivered. They didn't have a little plastic card to pay for it. And so they probably had a pretty good tab run up at the store there.
Yeah, I'll have to check to see if you still don't owe us some money.
Exactly. Although my grandpa was pretty sure about his debts. But as we think about all of that, let me just come back to you, Lisa, and maybe just ask you to share some of the things that are most vivid in your mind about Judd's store.
I would love to. Thank you, Lyman. My dad was a milkman, and so we would go and deliver milk and ice cream and fudgesicles to Judd's. And so I would always get to go when I got to go on the route with him. I got to go there. But I have so many fond memories of Judd's store, and I couldn't wait to get those 9th grade boys out of Woodward so that my friends could sit on the counter. And I remember I was so short I couldn't jump up on the counter. And so sometimes when it was after hours, like when the kids had gone home, I'd go over to Judd's and jump up on the counter just to be there. But I have all those fond memories that Randy was talking about, but I was fortunate enough to be able to teach school at Woodward. And it was a 6th grade center, for those of you that maybe remember the 6th grade center, and I was lucky enough to be part of that. And we still had recess. And one of the things that we did at recess is all the teachers would collect their money, and then every week there was a certain teacher assigned that would go to Judd's store and get us our Pepsi, because I still can't drink Coke because of my father was so against Cedar City. I shouldn't say that, but anyway, we always had Pepsi, and we'd get our drinks and our Snicker bars for our recess. And then today, I think I was sharing this with you, my daughter-in-law is here from Florida, and she had some dental work done today on her tooth. And so I said, Katie, where do you want to go for lunch? Because you really like Costa Vida and that. And she goes, Lisa, let's just go to Judd's. And I thought, oh my gosh, here's my cute daughter-in-law from Florida, and she loves Judd's just as much as I do. So I bought some. Then I had to buy some candy for my grandchildren because one thing though, before we go, the biggest thing I wanted to do, I don't know about you, Donna, but the biggest candy I wanted to buy was cigarettes. I wanted the candy cigarettes because my dad would have died to see me smoking a cigarette. And so I would always practice with a toothpick. And then I was afraid Mr. Judd would not sell me the cigarettes because he knew my dad. But I would give my money to Michaela, who would buy my cigarettes for me. And I could go and practice smoking cigarettes, candy cigarettes. I don't know why that is such a memory of mine.
So, Lisa, are you trying to tell us that you haven't had lung cancer, but you've had a lot of cavities?
No, just the cavities. You're right. Yeah. So anyway, it is just such a wonderful memory. I love Judd's store and seeing those boys sitting on the counter. You, Kevin.
I probably needed help to get on the counter myself.
Maybe I helped you.
Could have done.
Lisa, we're going to keep going around the circle here. You're not done.
Okay.
You're not finished. That's Dixie's speech. Huh? You're not done. Let's just keep this going. What I hear all through this is just that Dixie spirit feeling of what's the things that are special about this place. And I know I always have to reiterate this because I know that every town is special and every place that everyone grew up is special. But there's something about our town, our history, our Dixie spirit that really is, I don't know what the word is, but it's awesome. And Donna, you have always expressed that so beautifully just in your life and in all that you do and your stories. But tell us about your Judd's store memories.
Judd's was an everyday thing, every day. You never went to school without going to Judd's. It was just part of your school day. You'd go at lunch, before school, after school, whenever you could fit it in. It was just waiting to get over there. But talking about the boys on the right-hand side, I didn't dare look over there. I would go through the door and just immediately turn to the left because I was scared of who was sitting there. I didn't know what they were going to do or say, and I was
Could I
worried.
just insert here?
Yes.
You need to know that they were looking at you.
No, I don't think so.
Absolutely true.
But I remember the Pepsis with peanuts in it, Goober Floats. That's the first time I ever heard of them was when Judd's store on the counter, drinking Goober Floats. And when I think of Judd's, immediately I think of chum gum. I don't know why, but chum gum was always available at Judd's. And I don't know if I bought it. I just think of chum gum. But my son went to 5th grade at Woodward back when it had elementary classes in there. And his teacher called him up to the front of the class one day to his desk, and he thought he was in trouble. And his teacher quietly said, "I need you to do something for me." And so he's okay. And he handed him some money and gave him a little list of what he wanted to get him, and he sent him over to Judd's during the middle of the school day to get treats so he could make it through the day. And that became his thing. He was always the one who would run over for this teacher and get stuff from Judd's. No one else knew anything about it. They kept it their little secret. I thought, he may be in trouble in this day and age for doing something like that. But that was what his teacher had a little Judd's fix every day.
That's great.
Do you know what I remember? I remember behind the candy counter, it was just a box that he'd just throw the money in. Tom would just throw those coins in. And I'd go,
Because he didn't have
how
time
does...
to put it in the
Yeah.
register.
How do you even know? And it would just threw it in.
Didn't
left
he
it
also wear a little apron?
He did later on.
I remember him having an apron and keep the money in there.
Kevin, keep going from there because draw us a picture of it was pandemonium. Lines and everybody.
Yeah. We just had our class reunion a year ago, and we figured out that we have about 214 students in our class. So if you take that times 3 classes and then figure at least 50%, we're going to Judd's on a daily basis. Man, at lunchtime, you went in that store and it was shoulder to shoulder. It was tough. You had to fight your way up to the counter hoping that you're going to get a cold beverage. But I got thinking about this the other day after Lyman talked to me about doing this. You might know the answer to this, Randy. was Judd's the number one retailer of knee-high drinks in Western America?
I have no idea.
I think about how many he sold, because that's not really a super popular drink, but at Judd's it was.
You could get it.
You could get it. And here's the other thing funny about Pepsi. My parents always drank Pepsi too, and that is such a St. George thing. I'm not sure you guys even sold Coke. I know you had RC Cola and Pepsi, and that's all I remember.
Dad had a great big round Coca-Cola thing that he got the pop out of, and I don't know why, but there was a great big sign on the side of the building too that advertised pop and that kind of thing when we were growing up. And seeing originally it was in the 50s and 60s. It was Judd's. It's when the Green family took over. They changed it to the Thomas Judd store, which was the original name of the store.
Wow. There's some iconic things, and as you four here recall, you three here and me, when we were putting together a list of things for our little class reunion, we talked about some iconic things. And one of the iconic things of our generation, by far, is Judd's. I think if you were to ask any classmate, Judd's would be in the top three things on the list. You might have Frost Top, A&W, the Big Arch, a few things, but Judd's was that was where everything happened. It was just, like Lyman said, at lunchtime, pure pandemonium, but the rest of the time it was just a bustling place. But about a year ago, my daughter and two of my little grandsons, 8-year-old and 6-year-old, were in town, and they wanted me to take them to Judd's because they'd heard me talk about it. And my grandsons bought candy cigarettes there, so they are still available. And they had things there that you can't get anywhere else, and I'm not sure I've even ever seen them anywhere. So you mentioned, what did you say that?
Chum gum.
Chum gum. I remember the chunky.
Oh, chunky candy bars.
That's just a big
square
of chocolate. I didn't buy them. I just know they were always there. Anyway, but there's comfort in that you always know that's there. The other thing, you mentioned the Pepsi and the peanuts, and that was just a real thing. Wasn't my thing, but it was a thing. But shoestring potatoes, you can't find those anywhere else. But I think I lived on those for probably a year, every lunch.
How about a Boston pie?
Yeah.
Boston pie?
Yeah.
Barbecued potato chips. That was my lunch.
Yeah.
Can you believe our parents let us do that?
Curtis called me this morning. I told him I was going to be here. Curtis Lang told him that I'd be here with you today, and we were going to talk about Judd's, and that's exactly what he brought up. He says, we're the teachers thinking and our parents sending us there for a nutritious lunch of Pepsi and
Well, maybe our parents didn't really realize it.
I think that's pretty accurate.
Although mine should have, because my dad got his first pair of Levi's as a little kid in the 30s at Judd's. He told me that recently, and that it was the Walmart of St. George. That's where you went. That's where you got your feed, your tack, your eggs, fresh eggs from the coops out back.
The building behind the store, that long building that's there now, I don't know what's in it now, but that was the granary. That's where they would pick up their grain.
Yeah. And we were part of that bridge because I remember Levi's on the shelves.
Yeah, there were Levi's there.
Yeah.
And I wondered if some of those had been there for decades. Some of those pairs of Levi's.
Shoes, we have shoes.
Yeah, you had.
My wife has shoes in the house that we have that we got out of the store.
Really?
I'm just reminded that, and I forgot about it because when I got a little older, but there became a time as the school district got bigger and bigger that they went to a boy day and a girl day, so that only the boys could go over one day and the girls. And I remember also Dad telling me that the school district had come in and outlawed going across there. They had made the boundaries of the school so that it wouldn't fit Judd's store. And the community got so upset about it that the school district changed it so the boundary went over and fit Judd's store into it and brought it back over.
That's the Dixie spirit in action.
There you go.
The only stipulation was that there was to be traffic guards there to help over. So
yeah.
they had to pay, the Greens had to pay for a traffic guard to be there to help them across and that. But I always looked at Dad as that he didn't have a psychiatry degree, and he didn't have a social worker degree, and some of those other things, but he was a great listener. And I don't know how he ever got through those lunch hours with all of those kids stammering. And I guess it's okay to say that KSL came down and did a little YouTube thing, or did a newscast thing, and you can look up on YouTube and just Candyman Thomas Judd store, and it will show you one of the lunch hours that would happen and took place there. I always admired Dad because I tried going in to help him when we moved back to St. George, and I couldn't deal with it. I says, "I'm sorry, Dad."
But did you work behind the counter in your teenage years?
Yeah, I would go down. I'd go down and help Dad so he could get a break because he worked 6 days a week, 7 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. And so I'd go down and give him a break. He had a friend up on the boulevard, Bill Bringhurst, and so they'd go and have a little break together because Bill owned a gas station up there. And so I'd do that and help that way. And the store meant quite a bit to us, too, in the fact that my children worked there. And we had a daughter who had been in a car accident, who Grandpa, my father, allowed to come in and help because she had a brain injury. So she learned how to count money and how to give change and do all that helped her to get back to what she needed to do. And so all of our family, pardon?
That's a lost art.
Counting change. Yeah.
So it's meant a lot to our family. Plus, on Sunday evenings, we'd drive into my dad and mom's place and take the kids to Judd's store and let them get what they wanted.
Have the run of the place. That was one of my childhood fantasies.
You just needed to call, Lyman. I'd have got you in. We have a wonderful couple running it now. We don't really have anything to do with the store, but we have Graham and Heather who run the store, and they're doing a great job carrying all that old-fashioned candy and those types of things, and we're pretty pleased with it. The deal was that they could use the Thomas Judd name as long as they didn't turn it into a beer joint. So if it ever goes to something like that, the name's gone. But it is probably the most continuous business in Dixie.
And as everything changes on Tabernacle and all around, literally all around it with the high rises and all of that, it's still there. And it's really comforting to know that, at least to me.
It is to me. Every time I'm in that neighborhood, I always walk over to Judd's to get something. It's just something that you do. Back to first recollections. So Lyman mentioned that I moved from the big city of Las Vegas, which seemed so big back then, but it really wasn't very big compared to what it is now. But I moved here after 7th grade. And if I remember right, I probably went to Barkley my first time that summer with Lyman to do some things, and then came back. We started school, and I just remember first thing, that's what we did. It was Judd's, and they schooled me up right, got me trained on what Judd's was all about. And it's funny because I don't think I ever remember being in the lunchroom at Woodward. I don't even really know.
Was there a lunchroom?
I think it was.
It was the
annex.
girls' gym. It wasn't in
in the
girls'
annex,
gym.
and the only time I know that is I went there to talk to a girl. But they said she'd be over there. Anyway, I had never been associated with that because I got trained up on Judd's right from the very start. But I do remember some of the high school guys occasionally would come down in that. I was in 8th grade at the time. And they'd come down, and I don't know if I should mention names, but I just thinking of Scott Cannon would come, and he was larger than life, everybody's sports hero, and he would sit on that counter and pretty much dominate the counter. And I recall that was quite the thing. We'd all be in awe.
Kevin, can you imagine what the difference in your life if you'd have not had the opportunity to spend those formative years right here in Dixie?
Oh, it was definitely a life changer for a lot of reasons, but there's things here that our generation all share in common. It binds us together so much. Our class is so close, but it's because of those little things that have kept us bound from the very beginning. And I had friends and was not unhappy living in Las Vegas, but I didn't know what I didn't know till I got here. And we had a great neighborhood to grow up in, and we had great experiences through middle school and high school. And it's because of Dixie, really. Dixie is a thing. It's a place, but it's also a spirit, I think.
I was just thinking, I remember the rodeo parades, and the shady side of the street was not on the Judds because of the big trees at Woodward. So you would have to run across the street before the horses came to go to Judds because the horses started the parade. And then you'd run to Judds to get it, and you'd hurry back across the street because my dad was always on a horse because he was in the Lions Club so that I could see him, and I had my candy there for the rodeo parade. That was just fun. I don't know. I've just been thinking about that.
Just always comforting to walk through the door and there's Tom Judd. That was just such a good, familiar face, and you just felt comfortable in there. It was a comfortable place to be, even though it was crowded. It wasn't as crowded in our day as it was in later years, but it was still pretty crowded. And you'd be 2 and 3 in line, but just know that he's working through it. He's going to get to you. And it just was it was a home feeling. You felt good to be in that store.
Randy, did you have, it was just all right there. Did you have much theft? I just think about candy was just right there.
No, we felt like if anybody was stealing it, that they'd end up at a dentist's office, so that would be their payback and justice for what happened to them.
Okay.
No, I don't. Everything was kind of.
It was behind.
It was behind it.
Tom was always going back and forth. Let me tell you, I got eyes. I know.
Yeah.
You could have grabbed a piece of candy so easy. And I thought, man, and there's
No, I
coins
don't.
just sitting
I
right
never
there.
heard Dad talk about it anyway. I think he just trusted people. Dad was a trusting person, and he's the one who taught me about honesty and about those type of virtues.
But did you guys take your pop bottles back?
Yeah, occasionally, but usually we'd give them to one of the boys we had a couple of boys that would always collect bottles. Because a lot of times we'd get our sodas and we'd walk across the street and sit under those big trees at Woodward. But there was always we'd leave our bottles, and there was usually a couple of young men that would come pick them all up and take them back to Judd's and earn some money.
Earn some money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get some money from that. But
And wasn't it penny candy?
Penny and nickel.
Penny and nickel
I don't know
candy.
what a candy bar costs. I don't know. But I do remember you talked about going before school, and I don't know, when I was in 9th grade, and I don't know, you were probably in my seminary class. I want to say it was in the afternoon. I just remember I would have to really run from the Woodward building to get to Judd's and get a treat to take to seminary, because seminary was clear down by the southeast part of campus. And if you were really fast, you could do that. Or you'd have Brother Jacobson saying, hey, where you been?
You were feasting on the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's probably true. You know me, and that's true. So we'll leave it at that.
Well, I hate to bring this to a close because it's so fun. I don't want to do that without hearing anything else that might be on the tip of your tongue.
There's just one more thing, and that's it happens every time I go into Judd's. I just look back to that, I guess it'd be the left-hand corner, and I just expect to see Tom Judd back there. And I got to say, Randy, he was the most patient man to put up with all of the shenanigans and all of us, and he just seemed to just never get rattled. That's one of my greatest memories of going there. And we always had a good feeling. We felt wanted. We didn't feel like we're a burden, which you feel that as a kid in a lot of places. Oh, gee, we got to put up with these guys again. But he seemed to embrace that. And I think that's what made it special for us.
Can you hear the coins on the glass counter banging?
Yes.
Can you see the scratch marks in the glass counter, the money going back and forth? Just as a last comment, I think my dad would be surprised at how us talking about that store today and what it means to so many people. Dad had no idea the effect that he had with people and what he did in that store. And so I would be surprised if he recognized the fact as us sitting here today and talking about the thousands of young people that he was just a part of their lives. I don't think he thinks he did any good or anything like that, but still he's part of a heritage of Dixie and part of a life of thousands of young people who had the opportunity of going over there, better or worse, for sugar or whatever, or being cola Pepsi drinkers, but whatever. But I appreciate you doing this today, and I know my father would appreciate it very much, and my mother also, and my grandfather and my great-grandfather.
And that's exactly what this is all about, is that generational heritage that we all are the beneficiaries of. Everything that's been done in this town to make it what it is, and we've been blessed with all of that. And those are things we can't forget. And Tom Judd's smile, his kindness, his patience, that is real, that is powerful, and it still carries. And I can't help but, I know I keep coming back to this, but I can't help but think that it's the embodiment of the Dixie spirit. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I really appreciate this, and it's just been a blast. I know we could go on for the rest of the day, but I think we probably hit our limit here for the podcast. All the best to each of you, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Lyman. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
The Doc Booth Foundation is dedicated to empowering individuals through educational opportunities and promoting mental health advocacy. Through scholarships and funding for important community needs, the foundation perpetuates the can-do spirit of the founders of this community, using the lessons of the past to chart the course for a better future. Make your tax-deductible donation at docboothfoundation.org. Not Forgotten is produced by Ricky Valadez and made possible by the generous support of St. George Area Zag Stores, industry-leading tech support and accessories. Lyman Hafen's books can be found at lymanhafen.com. Once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. We came to Dixie, and we called it home. Oh, in Dixie, we've lived and grown. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. The hot winds whirl around me and take away my breath. I've had the chills and fever till I'm nearly shook to death. All earthly tribulations are but a moment here. And oh, if I prove faithful, a righteous crown I'll wear. We came to Dixie, and we called it home. Oh, in Dixie, we've lived and grown. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. I hope that there's a heaven with rivers pure and clean. But I know that there are others who'll come here after me. Though I may never